Keanu Reeves stepped onto the late-night stage, and instantly, something felt wrong. The audience, still grieving the recent death of Pope Francis, expected an easy night, maybe a few jokes, a light conversation about movies. But as Keanu walked in, dressed in a plain black suit without a tie, there was a strange weight in the room. His face was calm but distant, his steps slow, almost reluctant. He shook the host's hand politely, but his attention wasn't fully there. His eyes were drawn to something placed silently on the table, a small, golden rosary, gleaming under the harsh studio lights. The host tried to break the tension with a joke. "So, Keanu, still looking immortal. What's your secret?" "Holy water." A few scattered laughs followed, but Keanu barely smiled. He didn't even answer. His gaze stayed locked on the rosary. The laughter died quickly, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. The host shifted awkwardly in his chair, trying to pull things back. "Everything all right? You seem even more zen than usual tonight." Keanu reached out, his fingers barely brushing the rosary. His eyes clouded over, not focused on anything in the room, as if he was slipping into a memory he had tried to forget. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost broken. "There's something I never told anyone. Something he told me, the night we met in Rome." The audience leaned forward. The cameras kept rolling, but no one dared to move. Even the crew behind the scenes froze. This wasn't a promotion. This wasn't a performance. Something real was happening. Before continuing, Keanu glanced up, his voice steady, but heavy with meaning. "Oh, and before we continue, tell us what's the one thing you love most about Keanu Reeves. Let us know in the comments." Then, without waiting, he went on. "Years ago," he said, "I received a letter. No official stamps, no agents, just a quiet knock on a hotel door in Florence, and a hand delivering a small envelope sealed with the Vatican's crest." His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the memory pressing down on him. "Inside," he said, "were just a few words. I would like to walk with you in silence among the olive trees. No cameras, no press, just him and me." The host opened his mouth to say something, but decided against it. The audience was silent now, a heavy, living silence. Keanu continued, his words slow and careful. "I went. How could I not? I thought maybe he needed support for a cause. Maybe he needed help for a project. I never imagined what would really happen." His voice dropped even lower. "That night, he told me something. Not a sermon, not a request, a confession. And now," Keanu paused, staring down at the rosary again. "Now, with him gone, I realize I can't keep it inside anymore." The host leaned closer, sensing the weight in Keanu's words, but still unsure whether to push or just listen. The cameras caught every second, but no one behind them dared to interrupt. Keanu sat up straighter, his hand still resting near the rosary, as if drawing strength from it. "He didn't want the world to hear these things from a pulpit," Keanu said quietly. "He wanted them to come from a place no one would expect." The host finally spoke, his voice softer than before. "What did he say to you, Keanu?" Keanu hesitated. Then, like someone ripping open an old wound, he whispered, "He said the real danger to faith wouldn't come from attacks. It would come from silence, imitating holiness. From those who looked pure, but carried nothing inside." The room felt colder somehow. A ripple of confusion crossed the audience's faces. Keanu's gaze drifted up to meet theirs, a sadness swimming in his eyes. He feared, not the enemies outside, Keanu said, but the hollow ones inside. Those who would wear the robes, say the words, but mean none of it. The host swallowed hard, struggling to maintain composure. "Did you believe him?" Keanu didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached slowly into his jacket and pulled out a worn envelope. It was yellowed with age, its red wax seal still unbroken. The studio lights caught it perfectly, making it look almost holy in his hands. "I kept this for years," Keanu said, holding the envelope up. "I never opened it. I was afraid. Afraid of what it might say, and afraid of what it might ask me to do." The host, barely above a whisper, asked, "You're going to open it now?" Keanu looked him dead in the eyes. "I think I have no choice anymore." Without waiting for permission, Keanu carefully cracked the seal. The soft sound of the wax breaking seemed louder than anything else in the room. He unfolded the letter with steady hands, and for a moment, he just stared at the words. Finally, he read aloud, "To the man of silence, who carries light without even knowing it." His voice wavered slightly. "The world will not crumble from attacks. It will starve from imitation, from voices that speak but do not believe, from hands that bless but do not heal." The host leaned forward, completely pulled in. The audience was holding its collective breath. Keanu continued reading. "And when the time comes, you must not speak to destroy. You must speak to preserve, the small bead of truth still alive." He lowered the letter, the tremble now visible in his fingers. "He knew," Keanu said, voice cracking slightly. "He knew something was coming, and he believed someone outside the system, someone unexpected, would be needed to keep the flame alive." The host sat frozen, words caught in his throat. The studio was so quiet, it felt like even the walls were listening. Keanu leaned back, exhaling shakily. "And that's not all," he said, his voice a whisper. "He left me something else. A warning. A prophecy." Keanu's hand moved carefully as he unfolded a second piece of paper tucked inside the envelope. His face grew more serious, as if even reading the words was a burden too heavy to carry alone. He looked up briefly, catching the eyes of the audience, of the host, and maybe even those watching from their homes. And then his voice dropped to almost a whisper. It wasn't just a message. It was a vision. The host, who had been leaning back nervously, now leaned forward without realizing it, caught in the gravity of the moment. Keanu steadied himself and read, "The one who will undo me shall not come from within. He will smile. He will dress as a friend. But he will carry the void." A gasp rippled through the audience, small but undeniable. The host blinked rapidly, struggling to process the words. Keanu placed the paper gently on the table, next to the rosary, and stared at it for a long second. "He wasn't afraid of a great battle," Keanu said, his voice rough. "He was afraid of a slow death, a quiet collapse, not from attacks, but from emptiness wearing the mask of faith." The host shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his hands clasped together tightly. "You mean someone pretending to be good? Someone from outside?" Keanu nodded slowly, almost sadly. "Someone who looks like a friend. Someone who imitates goodness so well that nobody realizes the truth until it's too late." The tension in the studio tightened like a knot. No one even dared cough. Every second stretched longer, heavier. "And there's more," Keanu said, locking eyes with the host, then glancing toward the silent crowd. "After the Vatican meeting, I started noticing things. Letters, messages, all anonymous. Warnings to stay quiet, not to reveal what I knew." The host frowned, a mix of fear and disbelief flashing across his face. "Letters? Like threats?" Keanu nodded. "At first I thought they were nothing. Paranoia, maybe. But they kept coming. Different cities, different hotels, different handwriting, but the same message. Stay silent." He reached under the table and pulled out a slim, worn folder. He laid it in front of him without opening it, like a weight he wasn't sure he could carry much longer. "Inside this," Keanu said softly, "are pieces of a puzzle I tried to ignore for too long. Disappeared journalists, priests who vanished, notes hidden inside old Bibles, symbols, warnings, everything pointing to something bigger than I ever imagined." The host leaned closer, his voice tight. "Did you find out who's behind it?" Keanu shook his head. "Not exactly. But I found something. A name. Written in margins of forgotten scriptures. Whispered in letters with no return addresses." The audience leaned even closer, caught in a moment that didn't feel like television anymore. "S nominee," Keanu said slowly, clearly, as if the very words were dangerous to speak aloud. "It means without name. Not an organization, not a cult, a belief, a network of people who lost faith in the system, but not in God." The host sat back in his chair, stunned silent. The audience was frozen in their seats, as if breathing too loudly might break whatever strange, sacred moment they were now trapped inside. Keanu looked down at the rosary once more and whispered, almost to himself. He knew the walls would crack from the inside, and he trusted someone like me, someone invisible, to keep something alive. The host opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Keanu's eyes, full of a strange, painful wisdom, rose to meet his. "And that's when I realized," Keanu said, voice low and steady, "he didn't choose me because of who I was in the world, but because of who I was when no one was looking." Keanu sat there for a moment, his hands resting lightly over the folder, the rosary between them like a fragile bridge to something far greater than the moment itself. The host finally found his voice, though it came out shaky. "Why now, Keanu? Why reveal all of this here? Tonight?" Keanu lifted his head slowly and looked straight into the camera, as if speaking not just to those in the room, but to every soul watching. "Because truth is quieter than lies," he said. "And if I don't say this now, I may never get another chance." The host swallowed hard, unsure if he should push further, but Keanu had already made up his mind. He carefully pulled out another item from the folder, a photograph, old but clear. He held it face down for a moment, the weight of it almost visible in his hands. "It's from that night at the Vatican," Keanu said. "A moment no one was supposed to capture, but someone did." The studio held its breath. Keanu slowly flipped the photo over, showing it only to the host first. In it, Keanu and Pope Francis stood under a gnarled olive tree, the Pope frail but peaceful, one hand resting lightly on Keanu's shoulder. But it wasn't just them. Hidden in the deep shadows behind the trees, barely visible, was a figure cloaked in black, face hidden, watching them. The host stiffened, leaning in to see it better. "Who's that?" he whispered, his voice nearly breaking. Keanu's face darkened, not with fear, but with a kind of grim understanding. "I don't know," he said quietly. "But that same figure, it's appeared in 3 other photos sent to me over the years. Different places, different times, always watching, always distant, always there." The host stared at him, stunned, searching for some explanation. Could it just be coincidence? A tourist? A guard? Keanu shook his head slowly. "Maybe. But Pope Francis warned me. In the dream. He said, 'You will see the shadow before you see the light.'" The weight of those words filled the studio like a storm brewing just out of sight. The audience was completely still, caught in something too deep for easy understanding. Keanu placed the photo on the table next to the letter and the rosary, a silent offering to the unseen forces swirling around him. He turned back to the audience, his voice calm but urgent. "Faith isn't dying because of the truth. It's starving because of the imitation of it." "And silence," he said, pausing to let the words settle, "doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it's just the beginning of a war." He stood slowly, gathering the worn folder under one arm. The host, speechless, simply watched him. At the edge of the stage, Keanu paused and turned back, his face set with a tired, knowing sadness. "And if you think this ends here," he said, his voice dropping to a low, heavy note, "wait. Because what came after this was even worse." Without waiting for a reply, Keanu walked off stage, leaving behind a silence so thick it felt almost sacred. And somewhere in that silence, everyone knew this story was far from over.